Hello, crypto boys and ghouls, and welcome back to the channel, Tales from the Cryptmancer, where we feature content on play and earn games on the blockchain, such as Splinterlands. And in today's video, I wanted to share a in-depth conversation I had with Dwayne Cunningham, Infidel 1258, on his channel the other day for his channel members, and I wanted to share this version of the recording just because the audio is clear on this version. I think there was an issue with Discord and the recording of the audio. So I wanted to get out a clear version so you could understand and hear some of the conversation, because there's a lot of great conversation that Dwayne and I got into on all things Splinterlands in the current time here that we're going through. And it's a lengthy episode here. It's about 2 hours long, but I think it's a great podcast. So if you're looking for something to listen to that is really covering a lot of the current events of Splinterlands and also offers some interesting perspectives from both Dwayne and myself on everything that's happening in the Splinterverse, definitely want to check out this video. And I'm going to just hop into it because it is lengthy. And until next time, keep stacking those stats.
Hey guys, Infidel 1258 here. I hope you are doing well today. I hope you are ready to talk about some Splinterlands stuff. We got Tales with the Cryptmancer. Tales, how you doing, buddy? It's been a long time since we had a chance to check in and talk about all things Splinterlands, as I've heard you say. I like that phrase, by the way. So, how you doing? What's new? I saw a little bit of your video this morning, or last night, I think, about battle helpers. I'd love to get into that today with you. I'd also hope we can touch on land and prepping for that, because I think you've got some interesting insights that I haven't fully wrapped my mind around, and anything else that comes up. But first of all, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Dwayne. Thanks for having me on here on your stream here for your members. And yeah, it's interesting times in Splinterlands. Lots going on. Like you mentioned, we can probably spend hours just talking about battle helpers, land, and SPS and DEC and all that good stuff. So even though it seems quiet in the Splinterverse because there haven't been a lot of necessarily town halls or updates or new functionality in the game, there's just a bunch going on around Splinterlands that has potentially major implications on our game and our community and our economy. So interesting times indeed.
Absolutely. There's this feels like a moment that there is cause for concern. And we could maybe talk about that, but I mean, like runway, we talk about like the last town square, Aggie saying we haven't had income in for like all year long. Land hasn't come out. There's been delays. Double Coconut, something happened there with the tower defense game, and now Splinterlands is overseeing the code or reviewing. You know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of things that are, even for a guy like me who generally is quite bullish, quite excited, are raising some questions, let's say. And so I'm sure it'll be a fruitful conversation. I just want to make sure we are live right now, so bear with me for 1 second.
Sure.
Let's see. YouTube Studio. Not seeing anybody in the chat, and the YouTube website's not saying anything exactly, so it does say one concurrent viewer. If somebody is listening to this, can you please throw a comment? Okay, Paul says howdy. Perfect. Paul, confirm for me you're hearing this, but I want to see a chat saying that you got that this is coming through, because I'm not seeing it on my phone. But in the meantime, yeah, I mean, okay, Nathan says hello too. Yeah, I guess we're good. Hi, good to see you guys. Good to see Paul. Good to see Nathan. Thanks for coming by, guys. And so I don't know. I almost want to let you decide where we start this one, Tails. Like, it feels like often, and I hope you take this with all the love it's intended, you have a more bearish sort of tone than I do with respect to this game. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean that in like a disrespectful way. I mean, like, there's a expectation that you bring to this that possibly and maybe even probably I can't bring because I come out of it from like a different time and I've seen different multipliers on my portfolio already. And so then there's almost like there's more leash for a guy like me than maybe a guy who came in within the last 2 or 2.5 years. I think that's about your sort of history, if I'm not mistaken. First of all, do you think that's fair? Second of all, if so, on the basis of that, I'm really excited for this conversation. But I almost want to let you pick a direction for us to go here because I'm super excited about all the things we've already talked about before the live, and even as we've just quickly mentioned here. Let me know what you think about that.
Yeah, so I think that's a very fair statement, Dwayne. I think I wouldn't say I'm bearish. I would say I'm realistic about the positive things and the negative things that happen within the Splinterverse. I'm not from Missouri, but I feel like my personality is such where I'm kind of from the show me state. So for me, it's not about telling me what the future could be or telling me what is possible to happen. You need to deliver, you need to show me, and you need to execute. And I think where a lot of my sometimes realistic or perhaps bearish sentiment when it comes to Splinterlands comes from is the team, I think, has had some challenges with those attributes of delivering, of fulfilling promises. There's been a lot of pre-sales in Splinterlands. There hasn't been a lot of delivery on those promises necessarily. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Given time, I'm sure the team will deliver on those things. But in the last 2 years, if you go down the list of things that we've bought, as members of the Splinterlands community, there's a lot there that's not well, let's just say is unfulfilled. So again, I really have a show me kind of realistic perspective on Splinterlands because, like you mentioned, I came in, kind of at the top here in summer of 2021, and I believe in the Splinterlands team, I believe in the Splinterlands vision, and I believe in their roadmap. But with that belief has come a lot of asset investment on my part in the Splinterlands. And at some point, I would like to see my trust and faith in the project and the team bear fruit. So my runway, or let's say tolerance, pain tolerance maybe is what you could call it, is probably different than yours. Or for example, another friend of ours, Steve, who's also came probably around the same time that you did into Splinterlands. I mean, if you're free rolling the project basically,
Yeah.
and you don't have paper losses, and you have seen value in the ecosystem, it makes for a different mood or basically tone. Because for a lot of people, for example, like myself, maybe like Aftersound, maybe others listening to this today, we are approaching it from a different perspective, realistic perspective and experience than perhaps like yourself and Steve have. So, and I think that's fair. I mean, everyone's going to have a different journey, different expectations, different levels of investments. That's what makes this whole experiment very, exciting and fun. But it also certainly lends itself to possibly the tone on some of my videos, but also some of the topics that I cover, because I want to make sure things that are going on in my head that I'm sharing with my viewers and my members of the community that might be interested, because I'm probably not the only one thinking or experiencing these things. So I think it's a very fair statement. And going back to your point, I mean, there's tons we can talk about, but I think that is a definitely a valid observation and statement to say that we probably have different views or approaches to this game that we love. And I don't want to say that they're obviously very valid and very true. It's just that everyone has a different journey here in Splinterlands. So just keep that in mind when you watch content on YouTube.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it, especially even because I think you are in some ways deeper than I am. How much land do you have?
I went all
Do you,
in
is
on
that public
land.
knowledge? If that's
Yeah,
not
no,
public
it's most
knowledge,
public knowledge.
yeah,
I went all in land. I have two tracks.
yeah, I thought so.
I originally bought a tract, figuring I want to be a land player, and this was probably a year ago now. So I paid a decent sum of change for that. And it's I thought I got a good deal at the time. It's probably a little bit higher than the current market price for a tract, but not too much higher. So I don't feel terrible about that. But
Hmm.
then, through some other, I guess, twists of fate, I ended up getting a second tract more
Hmm.
recently. But so I have two tracks, which I'm very content with having. I'm on the fence if I want more or less at this
Yeah,
point. But I looked at land as an opportunity for me to level up and catch up with folks
yeah,
like yourself and Steve,
yeah.
because I couldn't do it through the cards. Basically the betas, the alphas, and the older cards.
Hmm.
I wasn't going to be able to play alpha gold tournaments and any of that stuff. So I looked at
Yeah,
it from my personal perspective and said, hey, if I can find a way to get into land at a reasonable price of investment, and land lives up to all that it possibly can be, this will be my opportunity to catch up, right? And
yeah.
to be a player like, you know, at maybe your level or Steve's level in the game. Now,
And
that was the dream. Whether I'm able to realize that or not, we'll soon find out, right?
definitely, and that's an exciting. This might be a good transition, unless you really want to grab something. But you tell me if there's something you want to dive right into. But it feels like land, and land is for me as I look at what you've got in this game, and then I compare it to where I'm at with my land assets. That is one of the I bring it up from in this moment because it's to me it's indicative of how it's not accurate to label your view, your perspective, your YouTube coverage as bearish. That's too simplistic because clearly you have gone quite deep on some of the assets in ways that I haven't even. And so if people want to call Dwayne a permabull or like, well, I haven't done, I don't have 200 plots of land. So, so it's too simplistic to say that. So I appreciate your nuanced response to that question earlier. I definitely listen, what I hear from you is a thoughtful and critical, but critical doesn't mean bad. Critical means like deeply analytical ear that attends to what is being said and what is being done and what is not being done. And especially when there's an incongruency between what is being a sort of expected or stated and then where that's falling short. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, that voice needs to be heard. The good news is, I think, with our team, with this game, it seems to me the team hears those criticisms loud and clear. And I think sometimes maybe if I had a critique for the team, it might be that they pay too much attention to, well, informing us, keeping us informed, attending to criticisms. Sometimes I feel like, especially if the town hall doesn't have anything to add at all, let's not even have a town hall. What are we, especially with the dates? And you've talked earlier about how sometimes things just aren't happening the way that they're promised. Land is one of those things. You've got 200 plots of land. Where are your thoughts around the recent delay? Where are your thoughts around the actual touching of the Mavs getting their hands on this? Are you hopeful that we see in August? It seems like not, even for Mavs. Let's put it that way. Let's start there.
Yeah, and I definitely want to answer that question, but let me first go back to another point that you made just previously. And the way I look at Splinterlands is, you can look at my assets on chain. You can look at my activity. I'm still buying, right? It's not like I'm selling. I haven't sold like anything in Splinterlands. I have not taken any ice cream money. I've continued to reinvest and diversify, what my assets in this ecosystem. So my perspective on the game is one of a stakeholder, a vested stakeholder, where I want to see the game be successful and live
Hmm.
up to all that it can be. I The content that I create again is just content that I'm sharing, that I'm analyzing, that I'm thinking about, and that I, ultimately would like to, hold the team accountable for. If the team makes a
Hmm.
great decision, I'll make a video and I'll tell, my community that it's a great decision and it's very bullish. At the same time, if they do something that doesn't seem to make sense to me as a stakeholder, and a
Mhm.
player, and I would say I have a deep understanding of the game and the ecosystem, I'll let it be known. So
Yes.
that's what you can get on my channel. You're not going to get sugar coated stuff. You're not
Yeah.
going to get bearish stuff. You're just going to get what I believe to be the reality of what's happening, whether it be good or bad. So to be clear, I have a very large vested stake in this ecosystem and game, and I want it to be successful.
Nice.
My the way I look at my YouTube channel is more like a journalist, if you could think of it that way, just documenting what I'm seeing out there, and it's not biased. Like if I
Mhm.
wanted to bias it, I would spin stuff and shill it and say we're
Mhm.
going to the moon, even though I had concerns, and that's not who I am. So
Yeah.
that being said, talking about land and where we're at right now and the timelines. Um, yeah, I mean, are we going to get it here in August? I mean, it's August 23rd. It's not on the Mav server. We have one maintenance window left. If I was a betting person, given what we've seen thus far, I would say no. We've got the main developer that would be need to be around if something catastrophic went wrong on
Yeah.
Go Live, out next week on vacation for
Mhm.
undetermined amount of time. These are not good things for positive launch of a critical, probably the biggest launch of Splinterlands history. So
Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily realistic that they would squeeze and push it out in August. Um, and, you know, for whatever the reasons, that being the case, I mean, are the reasons. They are what they are. That's just life. We don't always get
Yeah.
to choose our lot in life or what happens to us. So from that perspective, I don't begrudge the team or, think there's any, you know, malintent happening here. But I will say it's disappointing, from a
Yes.
player perspective, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Now I know on some other streams people will just say that everything's great and don't say anything critical because they're working hard. And I understand the team's working hard. I'm not saying anything against the work that they're doing, and I want a polished product. I will say, on a similar note, that I was not impressed with the GLG beta or launch of that to players. And so if we can avoid that first impression
Yeah.
and we need to wait, then I'm fine waiting because, well, GLG is a separate topic. But so from that perspective, yeah, I mean, if it needs more time in the oven to get it right, so we're not eating undercooked, potentially
Mhm.
poisonous food, then
Yeah.
yeah, let's let it simmer and bake for a little bit longer. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's disappointing because I remember going back to, let's say, December of 2022, so just the end of this past year, we got surveying. Well, so it was on the roadmap, right? But we got basically the ability to, I think, at the end of last year, if I recall correctly, with land, we're able to claim it. I think I forget
I forget the
exactly.
timelines, to be honest.
Yeah, LAN 1.0 before surveying. I forget. There was definitely a. It's been so long ago from a LAN perspective. We definitely did something at the end of 2022 with land. And I remember at the town hall, the last one of the town halls before the team went on vacation for the holidays, and they basically said, "Hey, we're going to be, basically launching what is effectively the scope of LAN 1.5, actually more scope than we're going to see in LAN 1.5. They were projecting we would see that in early or mid Q1 of this year. So that looks like February, let's say March timeframe, is what they had originally kind of forecasted. So what's disappointing, at least for me, from a project management perspective or again expectation perspective, is how can we miss so badly? Like
Mhm.
we knew the scope of what they wanted to include in LAN 1.5 essentially. And if you're telling your customers or your stakeholders that you're going to deliver that in, let's say, 3 months or less, and here we are almost 9 months later, and we're still not there yet, and we're
Mhm.
still not even going to get what was discussed in December of last year, that's a big miss. I don't know how, from a project perspective, that happens. Now I understand we're innovating here, right? We're doing things that have never been done before. Like what Splinterlands is doing on the blockchain for land, there's no example. There's no playbook that they're pulling from and copying from. So I understand that. But to miss on the magnitude of time doesn't instill confidence. And as a stakeholder, I'm just being honest and realistic here, doesn't instill confidence for all the other things yet to be delivered. Things like nodes, things like Rooney combining. These are all things that we've bought previously that are nowhere near existence. You know, we don't have any, I mean, just the list goes on and on. Skins, battle passes, arena draft mode, blah, 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 blah. There's tons of great ideas in the community. But if we're looking at the delivery timelines that we've been working with here, the challenge, and I mentioned this on some of my other videos, is that the world is not standing still waiting for us to deliver in Splinterlands. Web3 is moving at a breakneck pace. If you haven't been following the ecosystem Web3, there's tons of stuff being released on a weekly basis these days. And it's because, remember, the peak happened in 2021 for NFTs, where there's a lot of investment and a lot of money and a lot of seed and ICO and investment money coming into Web3 and playing and gaming in 2021, that summer or that fall. It's now bearing fruit. You've got Champions Arena launching tomorrow. You've got Stella Fantasy just launched today on mobile, full mobile version of that game. You've got things like, I mean, just name it, Synergy of Sarah. You've got, Alluvia making progress. I guess Star Atlas making some progress. I mean, all these things are, bigger games are having, their stuff push out too. So it's not unique to Splinterlands. But the Web3 ecosystem for playing and gaming is coming. And our runway for relevance, I think, is getting shorter and shorter if we're not able to deliver something of substance quickly, because attention will go elsewhere to the next shiny object for the next bull run. And just because you've been around for 5 years and solvent and here, and you know this from a crypto perspective, Dwayne, if you look at tokens from the previous bull runs, doesn't mean they're going to be relevant the next bull run, right? The next blockchain, the next technology, the next things takes root, and that thing soars where other stuff stays stagnant. So that's my biggest concern in all this. We have to deliver, we have to make forward progress, and that's my concern.
That's I hear, and I probably echo, maybe this would surprise some people, like a good amount of what you have to say there. I would say, like, I've done some thinking about this particular moment and how important land is, and that it be done right, but it also that it be done now, man. Like that, those are actually two very important realities. That it be done right, and that it be done really soon. Like we need this thing going. And I think I agree that this is the most important release that our game has ever had, and I think we will know. I believe this is fair. I haven't fully thought this through. I don't know if I probably could be convinced otherwise, but I'm pretty convinced that we need, when land launches, it needs to reach certain targets and set certain trends for growth and for adoption, meaning like a number of plots have to come online. I'm thinking 10% is like a minimum, and I think that I'm really hopeful that starts at 10% and trends to 20 really relatively rapidly within 90 days. The reason I think that's possible is because the returns might be juicy enough when there's only 1 in 10 plots have even been activated. The rewards might be juicy enough that it excites other plot owners and interested parties to then get going because, hey, look at how many SPS they're earning or whatever. And the reason I think this is deeply pivotal. And I briefly mentioned the game. Agrid said recently in a town square they haven't made any money this year. They haven't sold any new packs. They burnt the rest of the Chaos Legion. The Rebellion's, I don't think we're expecting Rebellion anytime soon. I don't know how we get to a place where this, and the runway, I guess, is up until 2024. So there are a lot of concerns, even from a guy like me who, walks in a high level of confidence, and trusts the team, like, very seriously, a high degree of trust, even though they haven't met targets before. I believe their vision is headed in the right direction. But it's all that comes back to then, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I see justification for concern, particularly if land doesn't launch the way we expect it to. And I don't expect perfect launch. I don't expect it to be a perfect product. It does look quite clean in the images we've seen. I think it will look nice and it'll be an enjoyable experience. I expect all that. To me feels like a certainty. But when I'm talking about, when I say like a strong launch, I think we need to see 10% of the plots turned on. And I think within 90 days, we need to move to a place where it's 20 or 25% or more turned on, because those sorts of targets, and these are rough numbers, but those sorts of targets will begin to tie up a substantial amount of DC cards, and that'll have positive ramifications for PEG, maybe the flywheel, as well as card portfolio prices, which can drive attention, eyes, investment. Plus, it can free up some. Like if your card assets go from 50 grand to 75, or 50 grand to 60 grand in a 30 or a 60-day window, I suspect that's going to start to spark more trading, more market fees, more buying and selling, more action, more comments on Twitter, more YouTube videos. All of that's good, good, good. So I actually think we're at this very pivotal moment, and I think I have reason to believe. Like, I'm not saying I doubt that it'll launch well, but I hope I'm being clear that I don't think this is just, hey, I hope it launches well. This is actually far more critical than that. I think it needs to launch quickly. And when it launches, it actually needs to be a success, because I don't frankly know that. I don't see how we reboot, or kind of, how we reset if this falls flat. If this is like a Zyriel, I don't know how, you know what I mean? This is too big. This is taking too long, too many hours. This is massive. And for better or for worse, we're going to see how that massive play turns out in the next days, maybe short weeks, right?
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is an inflection point for the game, Dwayne. And the good news is Matt has set it up so it's all connected. So if we get a spark, like you mentioned, or if we get this thing to ignite, it's gonna go. But the problem is they've kind of put everything, all their money on black here, and going to spin the wheel and see what happens, because it's not a slam dunk. This is a very complex equation and economy with lots of moving parts. And you could light the match and throw it in this powder keg and see if it lights. But if that match doesn't light and it goes out, then that's the risk. Because to your point, so much expectation in the community, so much development effort and time has been put here on land. If it doesn't go well, and there's a chance, there's a non-zero chance that could happen, or at least doesn't get a lot of traction initially. And there's a lot of data I could go through and tell you how it could play out, where that could be a possibility. But I think what's the bigger point of what you just mentioned there is, if for some reason land does not live up to the hype, and there's a chance that could happen, because we're not getting even things like grain market functionality on launch. More patience is going to be required here, and we're still very far away from 2.0 and 3.0 functionality at this point. So patience is going to be required, but it's what kind of a spark do we get initially with land? Is it just a pump and dump, or is it something more? And that leads to the bigger question of the runway and the viability of the project and the game, perhaps, because here's the thing is, if land adoption, right, we know we have 150,000 land plots that were sold. We have like 127,000 that have been surveyed. But if only a small amount of those actually get used and come online, land will be seen as essentially, I guess to be, blunt, a failure. and cards will not be soaked up necessarily in that scenario. And the team's going to have a dilemma, because if there's, 2.8 million Chaos Legion packs sitting on the secondary market unopened, and there's 1.8 million Riftwatcher packs on the market sitting unopened currently before they're being burned, and land doesn't do what it's supposed to do, the team really can't launch Rebellion and introduce more card inflation into this economy and ecosystem, hoping for revenue, because it would just further deflate and kill the asset value. So their path to revenue is dependent on land being successful in a lot of ways when you think about it. So and obviously their path to revenue from a traditional method is card packs. So they would have to look at things like a battle pass and other revenue streams to make up that gap, which could certainly be done. But the level of growth and the level of window of time that we have to work with, again, is working against us in a lot of ways. So again, to your point, it is an inflection point for the game. It is a moment of palpable anticipation and maybe nervousness, I think, for all those that understand the stakes here. And we'll see soon which direction this might go.
So then we agree that it's like a very important moment for our game. And I think we both agree that, there's cause for excitement and reasonable, confidence. But then we would also agree that there is a lot of ways this could go haywire, despite best intentions. And so, but I think it's important. I don't know that we can measure our the thriving of this new portion of the game and the success of this next step if we aren't clear about what would even success look like. And so I wonder if you have any sort of metrics in your mind. I talked about 10% of plots being activated in the first week. I think if we get to 20-25% across a month, or I kind of feel like a month is maybe 90 days. I want to see the right trends too. See, I don't have exact numbers for you, but Tails, do you have any, like, are there numbers or floating around in your head that feel as though they need to be reasonable targets that you'll be maybe watching? Is it about how many DEC gets sunk? Is it about how many Splintoshis a DEC is worth? Is it about how many SPS are being staked? Are there different metrics you've thought about or that you'll be looking to watch so that you feel you can get your head around, or maybe your hands around the idea of whether or not it is a success?
Yeah, I mean, the metrics, I haven't really gone into say what that would be. I mean, the economy is very complex. I mean, obviously more is better for metrics, generally speaking. But what I'll say is, I think a scenario where I could see happening potentially is interesting in so much that I have a feeling that the average landowner that maybe owns, let's say, one plot, two plots, let's say anything under 10 to 20 plots of land, I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to be underwhelmed with the returns and the costs in that ratio for land 1.5. And it's because the only rewards you can get from a tangible perspective are SPS, and that pool is fixed. You can't sell grain, you can't sell research tokens. All you do is have essentially costs, and you're probably not going to be able to recoup those costs in DEC and grain and other things, and cards and land, just farming SPS on less than 20 plots of land. So for a lot of folks, I think it's going to be an eye-opening experience for land. But at the same time, I think we've all heard the term, the rich get richer, right? I do have a feeling that the whales in Splinterlands have an ability to move the ball forward here, because I have a feeling that disproportionately the whales are going to get a lot of that SPS, and that SPS is not chump change. I mean, there's I think if I calculated it correctly, it's around like $3,600 a day that's giving out in the SPS land reward pool, which is not a ton of money for whales out there versus the cost of investment. But over a month, I mean, it's like, what is it? It's, I don't know, over 100,000 US dollars that's been given away in this game mode. So if there's some whales out there that can show and be public about it and say, hey, I'm playing Splinterlands and this DeFi version of the game just launched, land, and I'm making 20,000 a month or whatever, or 10,000 a month just playing this game, and that could maybe get the eyes of other whales that could look at this and say, maybe I come in and take a piece of this. And if you get maybe like a half a dozen of those bigger whales coming in and entering the ecosystem and trying to get a piece of that pie and believe in the vision, that could lead to some interesting cascading effects to the smaller people out there, like myself and others. So I don't know. I don't know what the metrics are, but land needs to show something on launch of 1.5 for people to continue to be excited about it. Because again, if the promise of land is something we're not going to realize until 2.0 or even 3.0 now, people's patience and people's ability to pay DEC costs on a daily basis are going to be tested very quickly. And yeah, what we're going to see, again, it's very complicated. Like, no one can sit here today and say, hey, this is how it's going to play out exactly. I mean, I can't do it. I'm sure probably Matt can't do it. No one can predict what's going to happen necessarily. The markets are going to market, and we're going to see what we see. Yeah, I mean, so who knows? But hopefully it's a positive experience.
Yeah, it's for better or worse, there's fireworks coming. Paul says he's going to be watching the number of plots utilized and maybe seeing how close DEC gets to peg. I do think those are valuable metrics to watch, because I do think if we get DEC to peg, and you might argue that it's unlikely, but I'm saying if we get DEC to peg, that has massive ramifications for this entire game. Every level, SPS price, card valuations, rental costs, etc. Because there's only so much of it. It's needed in this way. Once it, I think there's 4.7 billion, if I recall the number correctly. It's like $4.5 million available. But if we start to use even, Aggro thinks 2 to 2.5 of that's actually available. The rest is tied up in ways that can't really be spent. And so then, you're talking $2.5 million that's really truly, I guess, accessible for things like land, staking, etc. And you don't need 2.5. You don't need to spend the full amount. If we agree that $2.5 million worth of DEC is truly all that's actually tangibly present and marketable, sellable, etc. And you don't need to move every one of those to sell every one of those to start to see DEC go up. A 10% extraction or spending or allocation of that resource, I think, starts to move the needle. Exactly. And then I think, and the same is with SPS. And I don't think we need DEC to peg to see flywheel happening, because you have to remember that you talked about like one whale being able to post pretty significant monthly gains from land, and then other whales wanting to move in. These guys with $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, that to them it's just play money. They're not going to waste time going to and endure 5 to 20% slippage on DEC. They're going to go buy the SPS and just burn. If DEC is at like 950 Splintoshis ish plus, I suspect you're going to see SPS being bought and burned because it's easier to acquire. And therefore I think you're going to see less slippage on that, even though you're essentially acknowledging a certain amount of slippage by way of the burn mechanic. So I don't know what number is necessary. I'm not saying if DAC reaches 950 Splintoshis, we're good or it's been a success. I also don't know if 10% is enough in terms of plots of activated land. But man, I think there are about 3, maybe 5 different metrics we can look at and should look at, especially as content creators, when land is launching, so we can relay hopefully meaningful benchmarks. And I want to maybe transition a little bit because this feels like a little bit of a conversation about definitely, I think, being fair and reasonable here with respect to what land could be on the positive, but also the negative. I think we agree it's the biggest thing probably ever. But that feels like it begs the question, like, what's going on right now that has got you the most concerned? I feel like this is the thing I'm most excited about. I think there's real opportunity with land, that it could be a home run. I actually believe that, and that's why I've covered up positively and bullishly lately with respect to this. But I'd love to talk, and if you want time to think about the question, I'm happy to start the conversation. But is there a thing that's a forefront of mind for you, Tails, that feels it's the biggest concern, the biggest question, the biggest red flag for you right now within Splinterlands? I'd love to maybe unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have an answer for you there. But before I give you that answer, I want to just touch upon one thing you mentioned there. With what could happen with the launch of land, it doesn't actually have to be the actual rewards that drives the price and kickstarts the spark that gets this engine going. Never underestimate exuberance and greed when it comes to projects in crypto. It only takes so many people to just say, hey, I'm buying all my DEC and converting it, all my SPS to DEC in the liquidity pools, and I'm going in on land, and we're going to see what we see, come hell or high water. And all of a sudden, a lot of people start doing that, and then all of a sudden, crazy things start to happen with DEC, with SPS, with cards, with assets, with land. It doesn't, with crypto, it's funny because you don't actually need to see results or ROI necessarily in the real world. You sometimes only need to have the perception of it to generate the real returns. And that's what's interesting with this, because we don't know how people are going to react when land comes online. If we have people that just say, hey, I believe in this long term and I'm going all in, and there's enough of them, if there's enough people pulling the rope in the right direction, crazy things can happen. So from that perspective, I think we have to be aware of that. Even, I mentioned before kind of a bearish scenario where, the rewards don't justify the investment or the cost. Sometimes it's not about the actual rewards. It's just the I guess the the FOMO in the room can make crazy things happen. So we'll have to be on the lookout for that. Now, going back to your question, what is my biggest concern? In this very critical moment in time in Splinterlands history, my biggest concern is, we've always been asking the question, one land, right? That seems like to be a meme in the community. I think the bigger question might be, or the bigger concern might be moving forward, what now, right? And what I mean by that is, what happens if we launch land and instead of being, a big bang effect, it's a whimper? And, kind of like the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars when Han says punch it, and you just kind of get that kind of noise on the engines. What if that happens with Splinterlands? Because then the question is, what now? What other levers are left to pull if that's the response we get on Splinterlands land launch? Because what's our next saving grace? What's our next bet, or what's our next pony to try and get to where we want to go? And I don't see an answer there, like if you ask what now, I don't know. I mean, I'd be curious to see what the team's answer to that would be in their strategy meetings internally, because I'm sure this has had to come up. Like, they're looking at their runway and they're projecting things and predicting things and like going, well, if this doesn't work or this doesn't, do what we want to do, what can we go to next? Because they have to project, their capital runway and their revenues. And I'm curious what else they have up their sleeve. Is it Invenium? Is it a new partnership? I don't know. But that's my biggest fear, my biggest question.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Um, I think the unsatisfying answer in my mind, but I think this is the real answer. If LAN 1.5 doesn't do what we want it to, I think we are actual the next big landmark is like what we are thinking of as LAN 2.0. And I say that because the 50 liquidity pools that are supposed to come with respect to the tokens that land is supposed to produce should have an interesting implication for DEC liquidity and and then the flywheel. So to me that's actually not inconsequential, but I think that's going to be a real disappointing sell to the community if LAN 1.5 launches. Can you imagine coming out and being like, it's okay, guys, LAN 1.5 was a dud, but wait for LAN 2.0, it'll drive everything. Like that's not going to be very unsatisfying if it's even accepted. And for I think a lot of the audience, it'll be like, oh, I knew it. It'll just be this cattle or what's the word? Like it's a moment that will drive certain opinions to a negative place that I'm not sure can be recovered from, at least for some of it, of our community.
Yeah.
That to me feels like I think unfortunately, and one more quick note, you kind of you not tied to this idea of what would happen next is in terms of what other things could they pull out of the bag. To me, I feel like we would have to turtle up as a company, as a game, as a community. If 1.5 doesn't do what I think it's going to do, if it launches and it's a real dud, I think what has to happen is layoffs. I think what has to happen is securing the future development in the core, making sure because we don't know if the next bull market, aggro seems to think imminent, but we don't know that. And with their bags being held in DEC and Bitcoin and Ethereum, I would argue we need to be real careful if Land 1.5 launches with a whimper. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean the bumper sticker is land or bust is basically the answer to my question of what now, right? Because like you said, I mean, if land 1.5 isn't the answer, you're gonna have to double down and say land 2.0 or 3.0 is the answer. And that's, again, what we were talking about is so much is riding on this concept of land. And at the same time, you have in the community a lot of people saying, hey, I want to play the card game, I want to do draft mode, arena draft mode, I want to do new player experience, I want to do this, I want to do that. And there's not going to be an appetite or a room for that. Like you said, the team's going to have to turtle up and buckle down and get the submarine ready to go underwater here, because it's going to be difficult. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's, again, I know we're kind of taking this down a path that's not necessarily the cheeriest and brightest, but it's good to have the perspective, understand what could possibly ahead. Now, if that scenario happens, there's bound to be asset deterioration and bleeding of players at that point. And to your point, it's going to basically come down to who are the true believers that the project can be salvaged and that there's a future. And you think the salt mines were salty, this past year? You haven't seen anything yet. Once
Yeah.
if that scenario happens, look out, because the player base might go from like 2 to 5,000 down to like under 1,000, and then it's going to be real crypto winter here.
Yeah.
But you've been here before. You've seen what's happened in the past. I mean, you were playing Splinterlands when you weren't really making any money. There was no it wasn't even a thought in your mind. The question is if that scenario happens, does Splinterlands have 9 lives? Does it have another chance to rebound and rally and be innovative and come back with something at the right time, at the right place, at the right moment to be relevant again? That will be the bigger question. And look, I mean, we can't predict what the Fed's going to do in the US. We can't predict what crypto is going to do, what Bitcoin's going to do, what Ethereum's going to do. But we'd be silly to say that we're not influenced or impacted by that. So even if Splinterlands land is, wildly successful, right? The level of success, amplification of that success in a bull run for crypto versus a bear market for crypto is significant. And we're dependent on that, whether we like it or not. We're going to be impacted by it. So hopefully we get lucky. Hopefully we get lucky here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd like to add, I agree with what you're saying, but I'd like to add a bit of optimism. I wouldn't say this is like a 50-50 coin toss that this is going to work. To me, for a lot of reasons, and if you want, we could spend some time unpacking it, are what, almost like why would we be bullish about the success of land? Or why would we expect it to work, maybe is the question. Because I think there's a lot of reasons you could hold up and say, I can't prove to you it's going to launch well, but I suspect it will because of a variety of things, including the recent delay with its access on MavChat. To me, that's, of course I'm disappointed. I want to see that thing sooner than later. And I said earlier, it needs to launch like now, we need it out. But I'm saying, like you said, we want it not just released early, we want it released right. And so I actually believe that it's going to launch well. I actually believe that they're going to do a great job. I think as we've seen some of the eye candy from Nate, it looks clean, it looks good. I'm truly excited for what we've seen, and I think it's okay if we see a modest utilization of it. Modest to me, 10%, that's okay. But man, I think despite that optimism, because I think what I just said is optimistic, and there's a confidence I'm stating there. I think you have to also wrestle with the fact that, and we are right now, that it's possible that it not happen well. And if it doesn't happen well, revenue is a real problem. Not that land is going to provide revenue directly for the team either, but if it launches well, what might happen is the valuations go up, and then people start to become more sort of less thrifty with their Splinterlands portfolio, because you can now, if your portfolio doubles or goes up substantially because the land launches well, I suspect that means more pack sales. Maybe we get a new promo card that sells well. Maybe we get that mini set release and it sells well. Maybe they, on the heels of land, they launch draft mode would be an option, but I was actually meaning to say the season pass, and then we start to see some revenue, even if it's just trickling in. We need to get some revenue on the table. Hey, like that is so key. And land doesn't even begin to really truly directly answer that issue. What are your thoughts on that? Like what is the next revenue source that Splinterlands needs to chase after? Is it one of those things, or is there something altogether different that I didn't mention maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think two revenue streams that Weirdbeard has talked about in the past would be battle passes and arena draft modes. I think those are doable and make sense. So are those huge revenue streams? No, but they're different and they are revenue streams. But I want to go back to also to one other point that you made earlier on what are the metrics that you might be looking at to seeing how land is successful. Let me just ask you a question, and let me give you an answer to a question as well. The question is, if land is released next Tuesday, how much are you going to go live with of your land personally on day one? Now I can tell you of my land, I've locked and loaded for 170 tracks or 170 plots out of 200 plots. So I'm going to go with 85% of my land. What percentage of land are you going to have live, Dwayne, as an example?
Well, so Tuesday is still 6 days away. My desire would be that every single plot, I have 23 plots. And I still, by the way, I'm going to put this out there, I still am trying to get rid of that last plot. So one of my 23 plots was gifted to a guy named Klaus. Klaus, if you're listening to this, buddy, I still haven't seen your IGN pop through. I need that information. I'm still happy to give it to you. This is kind of the last call. I said that it would be the last call, like, I don't know, a month ago, and I haven't seen anything come through. If I don't see something shortly, I'm going to be re-gifting that plot. So I have 23 plots of land right now. I suspect I'll keep all 23 of those, and then I'll just buy this last plot and give that away. But my point is, I hope to launch every plot of land I own, and whether that's 22 or 23 plots, I hope to launch every one of them. Now,
So
that would
that's
be that would be a million plus DC if I go 50, if I go hard. And I do want to max those. So, I don't have a million DC. I have 570,000 DC. And so then I need to sell some crypto or I need to do something. So, long story short, hopefully all of it. I don't know if I'm entirely ready. In fact, I'm not entirely ready.
Well, and this is where I think if you take a poll, and maybe it's something you do on YouTube in a poll, maybe that you or I do, because from a land ownership perspective, if you go to Splinter cards, for example, and you see the landowners, you see all the people that own and have surveyed land right now. If I'm saying I'm going to be 85%, you're saying that you're going to be 100%, but you were talking earlier, the success level is 10%, right? Perhaps. If the community is saying, hey, we're going to go, and if I own land, I'm going to bring it live, we could be undershooting expectations here by saying 10 to 20%. Again, some of the large region holders and stuff are, obviously factors where maybe they only bring 10% of their region online. That might impact the numbers, but from what I can gather from the people that I'm talking to and about land and having conversations within the community, people are going to be bringing on land online because they've been waiting for it. They bought it and they want to use it. So if the sentiment out there for the average player is, hey, we're bringing on, 100%, 80%, whatever that happens to be, a high percentage of land that they own, maybe this thing, to your point, from an expectations perspective, is wildly successful. And maybe people are just underestimating, maybe people have thrown out in the community 10 or 20%, and people have got that number stuck in their head, when realistically it could be, certainly much higher. Maybe it's 40% when you average out all the region holders and stuff. You really have to do an analysis on, like, if you pull up splintercards.com right now, for example, Dwayne, you go to the land section and you get a list of all the landowners. You can see under the land area here, you can see how
Victoria
many,
or rich list,
and you'll see the actual, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see how many plots everyone owns and the total number of surveyed users, and it scrolls down for several thousand, right? But the point is at the top of that list you have a lot of people with regions, and maybe only 10% of those people are bringing plots online. But all these people here from 1,200 on down with 5 plots or 4 plots, whatever, if 100% of them are coming online, right? What percentage of land comes online? What percentage of, if you export this to Excel, for example, and you look at who are the region holders and who are the average holders, like the average Joes in Dodgeball, right? What is, if we assume that all these people that own 1 plot of land or 10 plots or less are bringing 100% of their stuff online, how does that compare numbers wise to those that have 4 regions or 3 regions? That can maybe give you a more accurate estimate of what percentage of land is actually going to be occupied. Because again, if you own maybe less than 50 plots of land, maybe the percentage is 80% or more of that comes online. So I don't know. It would be an interesting exercise, and I think we might be surprised by the results of that.
Do you think, this is a bit of a digression, but do you think that this land rich list and it having 3,736 accounts that own at least 1 plot of land, is this indicative of a rough estimate of the live human players still attending to Splinterlands? What do you think about that?
Yes, I think it's a subset. I don't, and I've mentioned this in another video previously, because not every active player owns land. Land is expensive, right? But I think this gives you, and some are investors too, and maybe not daily players of the game. But I think this gives you an order of magnitude of human players, because people, generally speaking, aren't going to spread their land across multiple accounts. Like if they have an alt account, they're not going to necessarily, if they have 5 plots of land, they're not going to put a plot of land on each alt account, right? So I think this is a very good indicator of the order of magnitude of real players / investors in the game right now that are active in, let's say, the last 6 months.
Mhm.
So yes, I do think that is true. It's obviously a subset. There's more probably than this number. That's why I said, somewhere probably around 5,000 earlier. But
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I haven't seen this rich list yet, so that's good. I'm glad you got me to bring that up. And yeah, that I agree that it doesn't make much sense. Now, Virus said he's split his plots of land between two accounts, but and Virus is super tuned in to this. I don't know if you saw him and After Sound cover like their prep, and Darkest Night was there too. But Virus is super tuned in how he's going to launch his land, what's required, and he's gone ahead and split his land across two accounts. The only reason I bring that up is because he articulated the point that it could potentially be beneficial, because you're going to have he has certain cards over there and certain cards over here, and maybe the soul bounds he can activate some of them if he has to, and he was making the point, as you just hinted at, which is that long term that doesn't make much sense, because when we need to build buildings and have storage facilities, that would be a double spend. You'd have to do it in for account one and account two, which makes zero sense. So I
Yep.
think this is a bit of a proxy for measuring again, not every human player is going to own land, but I think it's an interesting, let's say, like, it's not exactly a proxy, that's not the right word, but it gives you a hint anyways of probably the right flavor of how many. So probably 5,000. Yeah, that's interesting, because I really do remember when this was. I would look at the daily active accounts using DAP Radar back in the day, and we'd have 300, 500. On a good day we'd have 1,000 active accounts, and again, that would be me playing with two accounts. So like, there was more than, you know what I mean, there might have been 300 players.
Yeah, yeah. And going back to your point on the, the multi accounts for land, it makes sense, for example, if you have multiple, like if you own 10 Rooney, for example, but to get the prefix title across that. But remember, there's fees of moving grain or assets between accounts. Also, research tokens or account soulbound. So you'd be having or splitting your research tokens if you're farming those. So there are examples where it makes sense to split land across accounts, but for the general majority of landowners, I don't think it does. So I think this is a good order of magnitude for that estimate.
Let me just read a couple comments from the chat, and then I don't know if there's more that you want to touch on with respect to the land or anything else. I'm happy to follow your lead in the next thing, but let's just see what's over here. Paul was making a comment that new player experience. He said none of this works. None of our game, none of the growth that we're hoping for works without a new player experience. But simultaneously raised the point that the team needs more revenue streams other than booster packs. Absolutely. I think, I don't know if draft mode is going to represent a value to their wallets exactly, but it might. I guess it would, because it would represent a sale mechanism for packs, and so that's interesting. But then the season pass definitely sounds like it's going to put revenue in their pockets, and yeah, man, this has to be after land launch as well. Something about broadening the player experience, and I don't just mean from a new player perspective. I actually mean from just the existing player base, adding depth of and joy here within Splinterlands through new game modes, through new skins being released, maybe through a gated season pass, different things that could put money into the pocket of Splinterlands, the company, but simultaneously add extra joy to me as a player. To me, that's what I think about when I think about player experience, not just the new perspective. And he went on to say, let's see, actually that's about it. No need to split. No.
Yeah, and I think going back to Paul's first point there, I think the accurate statement is probably Splinterlands needs new players for the economy and asset values to grow. They can probably sustain and be operational with the current player base, just not losing a significant amount. I think that's important to delineate there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. We talked before we went live about your recent video this morning, and like I told you, I watched about half of it. guys, if you don't know, Tails did a video this morning or last night, I think it might have been technically, about battle helpers. And to me, this is one of the points. This is one of the topics within Splinterlands that give me pause for concern. I don't fully know how we're going to resolve issues such as this. I know battle helpers are different than bots, but they are interconnected and, let's say, entangled to some extent. And to me, that entire issue is problematic because one of my friends, Oscu from Time and Attention, he says, "Is Splinterlands a game or is this a DeFi protocol?" And I think it's important to admit that what he's saying is, if we want this game to thrive, if we want this whatever Splinterlands is to thrive, it should be an enjoyable experience. And that's Paul's comment. We need to work on the player experience. But part of my question, Tails, is, and I'll let you take it and run with this ball, but what do you think? To me, I'm not even. The more I think about it, I'm not sure. This is a bit of a hot take. Splinterlands is maybe a DeFi protocol and not a game in some sense. But I actually think what I mean is that the language we have for what a game even is doesn't include what this is. The revenue generating opportunity, the multipliers that are possible, the price appreciation. It's an investment. Is it a game? I just think our language is inadequate. And then what is a player? And a player, again, can a player use data from a Excel spreadsheet that they've tabulated? What if I tabulated it and give it to them? What if it's on a web page and they go to it? Again, there's just language we lack with these things. And I think there are stumbling blocks in here for our game and our economy, and the attractiveness to outsiders, that I think we almost need to get our definitions straight, is maybe what I'm saying. And until we do, I think our community is going to wrestle with what should be allowed and what shouldn't, because we can't even agree to terms. Then we therefore can't move forward in sort of a coherent sort of process and step and pathway. What do you think about any of that?
Yeah, again, in that video, I talk about the gamified DeFi concept, battle helpers, what it means for new players. And that video is probably, it's a lengthy discussion and probably worth listening to for background in this topic. But I'll say it's a very nuanced topic and it's a very complex question that you're asking, because it has many different facets here that we're talking about. You have, on one hand, you have the expectation of the players, and there's different groups of players, what they expect from the quote game, right? What they want, what they expect, it might be different than what we have today. And that's important to note, because that's a difference, right? What's there versus what we want, or possibly, and very likely today, two different things depending on what kind of player group you fall into. And then you have, on the other hand, what Splinterlands is doing with the terms of service and the game mechanics to make the game real, right? Make the game, the experience, what it is. And you kind of have, I think, a conflict here. I think you have in a lot of ways, an expectation of what certain groups of players want the game to be or think the game should be. And then you have, again, what the team is saying the game is, by what they do with terms of service, by what they do with game mechanics, what they say in town halls, what they don't say, for example. And right now, whether we like it or not, I think from a pure definition perspective, what we have in Splinterlands is essentially probably gamified DeFi more than is a pure game. And when I say game, I'm defining game as a PvP based game. And that's what ranked battles is. That's what tournaments is. That's what brawls is. You're playing other, people, ideally in a PvP type setting. There's not like a PvE mood in Splinterlands today. So, that being said, I think what we have with the nuance that, whether terms of service are updated or not, battle helpers exist. That's a fact. Whether it's XBot, whether it's possibly the idea of private battle helpers like in other guilds being available to players in the game privately. In either case, the actual concept of a battle helper exists in the game, and as long
Yep.
as it exists, and as long as it's undetectable, and the ability for Splinterlands, a company, to limit its use, it basically means that whether we like it or not, we have a gamified DeFi environment right now versus a pure like game, competitive game that you could play, like in an esport type environment. Like for
Yeah.
example, if we look at your screen here in the battle that you're playing, you're playing against an opponent that could have just fed in their data here, optimized data from AI generated data sets to give an optimal team. They're not really playing the game. They're just putting in a positive EV lineup of assets to win SPS tokens from this ranked battle mode and prevent you from getting those tokens. So it's kind of like when in my video I compare it to the chess. Like chess in its pure form as a game is played, human versus human, right? It's not like you have two humans sitting behind, an IBM Big Blue computer saying, "Hey, let's go play chess. You make your move. I'll check with my computer and see what it says, and then I'll input their recommended move."
Yeah.
That's not a game. That's just, you might as well just have the computer do it. Gamified DeFi is, basically, from a pure definition perspective, is probably more what we have than in an actual game right now with the availability of battle helpers. Now, I would argue, and I mentioned in my video, that Splinterlands being perhaps the largest and most successful gamified DeFi project in the world is not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, if you lean into it, could be a very powerful thing. I mean, if there's crypto projects that are just built on gamified DeFi, and they would say, hey, if we're the most successful crypto project and have the most users and most assets being used on a gamified DeFi platform, we're a success as a crypto project.
Yeah.
So again, gamified DeFi is not a bad word. It's not a bad thing necessarily if you lean into it. And if all your users and essentially player base in this case understands that's what they're getting into. So you can have success in this vertical or in this niche area. You just have to reset expectations and then lean into it. So that's what I'll say there, Dwayne.
Yeah, I really like that response because I actually, like I said, this is kind of a new thought for me because I'm actually starting to wonder, first of all, if we, like, I've long, ever since I first heard that, I thought, is that real? Like, is that what we are? And now I'm starting to, I think, accept that that is what we are. And then today, for the first time ever, before we started talking, I actually said to myself, is that a bad thing? Does that mean that I've misunderstood something, or that I no longer am interested, or that I should be no longer interested? And I guess what I'm saying is that now that I think I agree, that's probably what we are. And I say that because of the bots, because I actually think bots are still present, and I think the data shows that actually clearly they're present in wild. But I mean, as I listened to your videos this morning, and yes, guys, go check it out. You didn't say this, but I couldn't help but wonder, as you looked at the top 20 in Modern, the top 20 teams in Modern, and Modern is supposed to have no bots, and 6 of those 20 teams were either IG or the Legendary Dragons or whatever they're called. And here's the problem. I don't know who's using a bot, an in-house bot, and I think there would be, I imagine, I know very little about this topic, but I imagine it would be possible to operate an in-house bot in ways that are less detectable than you might think. And so then I started to wonder, okay, how do I know who I'm playing is a human? And when I mean human, I mean like somebody sitting there playing, pressing rumble, clicking their selections themselves, thinking it through for themselves, etc. And then I realized I don't really know. And I could finger point all day, but I'm saying, like, the truth is I don't know if I'm playing a human or not. And And sometimes it's obvious. It's the account is bot 123, and the selections are so clearly bottish. But you know what I mean. There are times and there are moments where you won't be able to tell. And then the question that lasts or that lingers is, does that ruin it? And I'm not sure it does, but it does make me. I think I need to do more thinking about what this means, or how it changes. I don't know if it changes anything, but I want to wrestle with this more. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to, accurately, use, proper terms, because a bot is different than a battle helper. But like you
Yes.
mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, they're entangled, they're intertwined, right, in kind of their origin and its definition. But for example, for Modern League, you can't use a bot legally with terms of service. It's a bannable offense in Modern League. But right now, you can technically use a battle helper, private or public, if a public one was available, until terms of service are updated. So that's an important distinguishing, you know, thing to be aware of. But to your point, what is the real difference between a bot and a battle helper? Well, it's not coincidence that XBot had the best bot software for public automation, as well as the best battle helper, because the data sets that the bot uses to form a team and input it automatically are the same AI generated data sets that the battle helper gives to a human to enter manually. So the difference really between a bot and a battle helper in definition is scale, meaning a bot can run autonomously without any human there interacting in the game, where the data between a bot and a battle helper is probably identical, right? Ideally. But the difference is, from a scale perspective, you have to have a human on one end of the screen, setting up the battle helper to query it, reading the data, manually putting that data into the game and hitting the rumble or submit button. That's the difference. That's an important differentiator, because the difference is you can't scale. Like, even if you had an army of people sitting in a call center doing battles in a battle helper, maybe they could do 3 or 4 simultaneously at a time, maybe at best, if they're super fast and, I don't know, proficient. With a bot, you can have hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands running at the same time. So the difference is scale. With a battle helper, you have to have a human at the other end, technically, by definition, inputting that data, and that's the main difference. The process is the same. There's no necessarily brain processing happening necessarily. You're getting data, you're taking that data, and you're selecting your team and putting it in. You're not thinking yourself as a player. You're not approaching the game like, hey, I'm playing this game for fun, and I'm going to think of a good team. I'm going to beat my opponent. You're thinking, no, let me get this battle in, let me get this win in, let me get the SPS so I can move on to the next battle. And that mentality and that approach and that goal is the differentiator that I think people need to understand. The reason people use battle helpers for the most part is to get rewards, which is gamified DeFi. It's to get the SPS token. It's to get the Soban reward cards on your account. The reason why you pay for a battle helper isn't because necessarily you want to have fun using a battle helper or anything like that. It's gamified DeFi. You want something of value, so you're paying to use the battle helper because you're getting more in value than you're putting in addition to your time, right? So I think that's important to differentiate.
Yeah, I think that's true. As I listen to you draw that distinction, though, I want to hear your thoughts on this. It feels like you might be saying that are you saying that you are less concerned about battle helpers because of the nature of how they are not scalable than you are about bots? You are concerned about battle helpers? Am I right in saying that, or are they not a concern to you? Help me understand your position on battle helpers.
Again, it's a nuanced conversation. So I am, as a personal opinion, I'm against bot farms and extraction from the ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
That's my clear position. If you watch my channel, my YouTube video, that's very clear to understand. Yeah. Now, for me, when it comes to battle helpers, I have a different view. Like, as a pure player perspective, I wish they weren't around and that I could just play the game, me versus you, me versus After Sound, me versus Dark and Night, me versus Steve, etc. Yeah. But that's not the reality. And as I mentioned in my video, because of that, because you can't detect, because you can't enforce, because you can't prevent someone from using a battle helper, my logical conclusion is that battle helpers need to be available for all players to choose to be able to use in that case, because otherwise you create an unfair advantage, an unfair playing field. It's kind of like, I mean, it's not really the same, but it's kind of like I guess the argument that some people in the US have with gun laws, right? They say, you know, if only the bad guys have the guns, that's not, you know, a good thing. You could almost take the same argument, and it's not, I don't want to get political or anything, but it's kind of a similar argument here when it comes to battle helpers. It's kind of like if only the average person is not allowed to use battle helpers because it's against terms of service and that they're not available for them to use, that person is at a disadvantage in the game by following the rules and regulations and the spirit of the game, because those that do not follow terms of service, that violate terms of service and use a private battle helper when they're not allowed because they can and they're not enforceable or detectable or bannable or preventable, then it basically leaves a situation where the average law-abiding citizen is at a disadvantage. They're not you know, on the same level playing field in a gamified DeFi scenario as the person that is breaking the rules. And that's where my belief with the current proposal that passed, while the intention was in the right spot, the effect on the game, I think, is will have the reverse or the adverse impact in the fact that the reason for the proposal was to protect the average player. But in fact, it's actually going to hurt them, because those that go around the rules and do something they shouldn't be doing, the bad actors, are now going to benefit by getting tournament wins, by getting brawl wins, by getting ranked battle wins over those that don't have access to that tool.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, because I do think I'm of the opinion that I'd say this to different people in my real life. In Canada, we have different rules. I don't know if you guys have similar rules where you're from, but like, for instance, you're not allowed to drink beer in public. You're not allowed to go to the beach and have a bottle of wine with your wife. There's laws against that. It would be dumped out at minimum, and you might be fined at worst. And I would argue that every day of the week, every night of the week, every day of the year, there are people in my neighborhood who are drunk in public, but they don't adhere to the social norms. They don't, worry about the laws. They just do what they want to do because they want to do it, and they're not going to be swayed because it's made illegal or prohibited. They're going to do what they want to do. And so what ends up happening is you get people, I forget his name now, the guy who did XBot, but he complies because he's willing to, like, he actually cares. It seems to me, I don't know the man, but it seems as though he genuinely cares about this game, this community, and providing a service that we want. And if we don't want it in X scenario, modern league, tournaments, etc., he doesn't want to bend those rules. He actually, I think, wants to respect the community in that way. So when we create prohibitions like this, I think you're right in saying that it'll be certain people that'll suffer. It won't be guys who can do their own processes, their own systematization, their own, technology behind the scenes. It'll be those who can't do those things, or who don't even know that they can, and therefore never pursue it, never do it, never achieve it, because they don't know that it's even possible and it's not made readily available. So, natural question, and forgive me if this is, I might be just stealing the thunder of your second half of your videos. Tell me if I am. But do you feel that, because it seems like a natural argument from what you just said, that we should articulate a justification for introducing sort of a Splinterlands offering this sort of tool and technology to its player, and just like you said earlier, maybe it's okay if we lean into the vision of we are gamified DeFi. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the logical conclusion. Whether Splinterlands offers it or a third party like XBot or Peak Monsters or whoever else offers it, I think once the genie is out of the bottle and it can't be put back in or it can't be detected, enforced, or banned, you just have to realize that that's reality and that's what you have to work with. And leaning into that reality, I mean, it's going to have implications to the game and the players. But
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't you, as a new player, for example, if you look at it from a new player perspective, wouldn't you like to go into a new project with eyes wide open and understand, you know, what the rules are, what the expectations are, what the reality is, rather than come into a project where, in my videos I mentioned, it's kind of like going to a shady home game of poker where you're just getting, cheated out of your money unknowingly over time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
no one's going to want to come into an environment like that where that's a reality, where that's something that is going to happen and is kind of table stakes. So they're gonna, like I said in my video, they're just gonna go down the road to the casino, where there's regulations and guardrails to protect a poker player that wants to play a fair game, right? And they're not playing against the house; they're playing against other people. So that's kind of where you could almost say what Splinterlands as a company should be. It should be like the casino that offers a fair game or a fair environment to play in, rather than one that's basically tilted in favor of those that are not following the
Yeah.
law of the land.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be a divisive statement, but I don't. I think you might be right. I say it'll be divisive because there are people who do hope. I mean, even you alluded to this. You wish that battle helpers weren't a thing, that bots weren't a thing, that this was truly a Dwayne plays Tails situation, and it always was, and it always would be. But that's not what it is. And you said, you can't put the genie back in, right? It's like that. I I think in modern though, hmm, I don't know this, but I think in modern we've seen success in curtailing the bots. But part of me does wonder if that's really only had the degree of success that it's had because perhaps because wild is still available to them. Meaning, if we really said bots are gone in every level, would they just go ahead and iterate and become creative in ways that I don't know. So, I guess follow up question then. Do you think that our success, imperfect though it may be, with respect to bots and I know bots are different than battle helpers, but let's trickle over into this a little bit. Um, with respect to modern, has that success, first of all, has that been a success? And second of all, if it has been a success, how much of that success is owed or due to the fact that the bots really have had a chance, or the accounts that run that can go to just wild and avoid that fight right now? And would they just stop? Would it fail to work if we said you're gone from wild also, because now they'll just iterate? Thoughts?
Yeah, so I agree with your statement there that bots have just, I think, for the most part, you know, been like water and followed the path of least resistance and flowed over into wild. Now, for some reason, the DAO or the community says we don't want bots in wild or ranked battles or tournaments or brawls, and now they have no place to legally exist or play. I think then you're going to have basically a scenario where the bots are going to say, well, now I'm forced to make things difficult. And then you're going to have to start enforcing it because they're going to say, hey, you're going to have to ban me now because I'm going to play somewhere and you're going to have to find me and ban me. Otherwise, I'm not leaving. So there'll be some of
Yeah.
the bots that leave and that comply with the rules because they don't want to lose their spellbook or their account or whatever. But I think when push comes to shove, if you give them no quarter, then you're going to have to start enforcing and start bringing out the ban hammer because otherwise it just becomes, and I mentioned this in one of my other videos, it becomes basically a denial of service on the Splinterlands support team where they basically say, all the bots say, if you have 40,000 bots come online and say, hey, we're going to play modern, you're going to have 40,000 support cases, investigating every one of those accounts and banning them or doing whatever to them. I mean, yeah, you could, but is that what the team wants to do right now and what the game needs right now? Probably not.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting problem in a scenario. And I want to also bring up another scenario that is interesting from a just a thought perspective. That's certainly plausible. We see leaks all the time of data, in the real world and in government and stuff. What would happen if Siler just one day said I had enough, or someone hacked Siler's server or something and just dumped all the XBot data current as of today, for everyone to view on GitHub or something, and you could just download the database of all of the XBot teams and AI. Now, what do you have? You have all that data out there for everyone to be able to process and use as they see fit, or at least from that point in time. So now you have that level playing field, essentially, that people could take advantage, at least for a point in time picture of data. But that's the thing is, that data exists, whether it's in Siler's XBot servers or other private servers, what have you. That data exists out there in the world today. The difference is who has access to it today, and that's where if the data exists, it's kind of like, well, shouldn't it exist for everyone to use, to be fair, rather than just a select few or a knowledgeable few or an elite few? I mean, what's the mantra of crypto? Power to the people, kind of thing, right? So that's not the power is not with the people's hands when it comes to the battle helper data right now.
And I would say it's interesting that I'm not a crypto noob, but when I came to this game after, I don't know, 2 years of being, maybe a year and a half being in crypto, I did not know, at least at first, that there were bots that could play this game for you. And they were quite bad back then, like really, really bad. But I didn't know they existed. And then I heard about them, but I heard they weren't that good. And then they started to get better. And Archmage was the first time I heard that they were pretty good. And that's interesting because as an individual who not only has played this for a long time, but has been in crypto for a fairly long time, I wasn't aware that this was even something I was facing at first, let alone that I could utilize if I was inclined to utilize. And that's important because like a new person can't be expected to come in and recognize, like, especially when we're creating a game where there's a certain degree of investment that's expected. And it's always kind of further up and further in with this game. Like the more assets you get, the more rewards they expect to deliver to you. That's kind of what the team has said. If that's the game we're creating, I think we need to be clear with potential investors about what the experience is. Is this human to human? Is this not? I think some element of communicating this, or maybe embracing what it is and how people have found third-party solutions. I don't know. I don't love this idea, but I just don't see. I don't know that it's fair to brand new players who have no idea that these things even exist, and then they just get slaughtered. And is that going to be the game that attracts new players? And someone would say, well, Dwayne, we should just get rid of them. I've said this so many times on the channel. My face, like I start to black out when I repeat it again. But these complicated problems have complicated solutions, and people want to say, just get rid of bots, just get rid of battle helpers. And that blog post, again, nothing bad to say about Dave McCoy, great guy, but this idea of eliminating battle helpers, I don't know how we do this. I think it's more complicated than that. I don't even think the definition is clear enough. So then I kind of get to a place, well, yeah, if we could, let's do it. But I don't know that we can. And we have had some success in modern recently with respect to bots specifically. But then again, like you said, is that just because water goes to the place of least resistance, and that means wild, and therefore there's no fight to be had because they just move along and collect their revenues at a different league? I don't know, but I definitely think we need to be realistic about the complicated nature of this problem, and it's I think a little bit infantile for people within our community to say, just get rid of them. The game will be better without them, because it's so simplistic. There's way more. It's difficult to do. So it's not that easy. If it was just snap your fingers and it's all better, great, but it's not. And then there's downstream ramifications if we try and implement, like you mentioned, banhammer. And what does that mean? And in every other game where there's been bans, there definitely is mistakes along the way. So again, I don't. If we can get rid of it, let's get rid of it. I'd love human to human experience, but maybe this isn't a battle we win. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a dilemma for sure, and that's why my video is a little bit lengthy that I just released yesterday, is because it's a complicated topic and there's not an easy answer. So we had to discuss it with the stream audience, and we go into a lot of detail. But yeah, it's very nuanced, very complex, and it's bound to be an issue that is with us for some time, I think. So. But what I'll say that I think as a community, I think we have, the DAO in place and the communication channels in place with the community to work through and present solutions to the team and come together. So that's on a positive note, that's I think one thing that I think brings hope, right, to the game is that with enough sentiment and enough community members behind an idea that brings the game forward and in a better spot. Like, for example, I do think the ban for bots in Modern did that. How many games can say that the players in the community influenced the game, for better or for worse, but influenced the game and got what they wanted? Very, very few. So from that perspective, our community and our game is very special.
The video in question, guys, fake it till you make it. I'll link it in the description of when I do clip a portion of this. But yeah, guys, check it out. 404 views, 15 hours ago. Splinterlands, fake it till you make it. A discussion on recent proposals. Yeah. What else is there to talk about? We had a few ideas. Any other comments or topics that you want to get into there, Tails?
No, I mean, it's been a great conversation. We didn't even get into land strategy and planning yet, which is a whole nother thing. Because I know you were looking at what you're going to do with your 23 plots of land.
That's right.
And I've been obviously going through similar exercises for my plots of land and getting ready here. And that's a whole. I mean, you could talk literally for hours on that topic alone, just in the planning, the strategy, the thoughts. Yeah. I don't know if you want to go into that today or not, but we certainly can.
I would love to, if at least like 15 minutes or so, if we could even just graze the surface, because I need to get my head around this, to be honest, and I'm not ready. I just sold. With respect to land, I definitely want to have a solidified plan, and I know my time's running out, and I know it's going to be on Mav server soon-ish, and so I want to be equipped and prepared as best I can. I'm not there yet. I have 580,000 SPS. Today I just sold a title. I sold one of my gambler titles. That's the Splinterfest title. I got two of them because I brought my buddy. I paid for his account, his attendance. So I got two of the gambler titles, and I sold one, and I sold another title, my Scorcher title. So I have 576,000 DC, and that's entirely from title sales in the last week or two. I need to probably double that. If I only have this amount, these are my lands here in front of me: common, rare. I have 4 epics, 8-ish rares. I have a couple magicals, 3 magicals. I want to launch it really well, but that doesn't mean 50,000 DEC on every plot necessarily. Are you thinking, Tails, that you are going to go? You got 200 plots. You said yes, you want to go hard. Does that mean 50,000 DEC on every plot, or does that mean something more like 12,000 on a good number of them? And yet that's still a pretty good launch. What does that look like or feel like for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a ton of ways to skin this cat, and it really comes down to your budget and the number of plots of land you have, because it's going to dictate what's your budget for staking DEC on land, what's your budget for card acquisition, what types of cards should you target, gold foil or regular foil, Chaos Legion, betas, what have you. And it is I mean, wow, it's complicated. What I can say is, I would do a mapping of your cards. You can export from Peak Monsters your decks to an Excel spreadsheet as an example.
Yeah.
And what I did initially is I basically said, I want to have a playing deck still. So I want to have a deck that can still compete in, let's say, Champion. So I had to basically earmark what cards I needed to make that deck successful and still work. And then I said, okay,
Yeah.
I've set these aside to play. What do I have left over, right? And what does it mean to land for elements and bonuses and DEC requirements? And I started mapping my remaining cards in my collection to land based on the element bonuses, based on my priority of what I was prioritizing, whether it's keeps or legendaries or occupieds or commons or naturals or research, magical lands, etc. Once you start doing the exercise of mapping the cards to your land in your priority order, you can start to generate calculations around production points and then grain requirements and balancing of, do I have grain? Do I need to buy grain? Do I need to make grain? What is that balance of production points to SPS or keeps or research to grain look like? Do I have did I purchase time vaults? Do I have time crystals to clear the land? Because many people don't understand that the time it takes to clear even a common plot of land based on the production points that you have. What does that mean? Do you have a strategy where I have like a neutral, high PP neutral team that just goes in and clears land for me every 3 or 4 days? Was the cooldowns associated with that? So there's just the complexities in the planning here is quite a lot. So the first question I would ask, for you, because you mentioned you want to get online quickly, is, do you have time crystals? And if so, how many do you have? And have you looked at how much that would clear, on day one, and how much it would cost if you wanted to buy more?
I have 2,700 time crystals.
Okay.
And I did look at this briefly. I know that if I go over to...
It's 150, I think, or excuse me, 10,000 PP per time crystal is what it'll clear, I believe.
Yeah. Let's see. Time crystals, terrain preferences, clearing plots. So a common natural, 1.5 million required. 1.5 million, right? Is that right? Am I reading that right?
Yep, 1.5 million, and it's like 10,000 per time crystal is what it gives.
That's right. Time crystals. And yeah, 100 DC will, hang on. So 1.5 million PP, which is that amount of PP that will clear a common natural, is going to require 150 time crystals. So if I just even look at my commons, I think if we go 150, I can do 18 commons is what I have the time crystals for, essentially, which means I need more. Just very quickly, I could look more deep into that, because it's not just, I have 3 epics or something like that.
And that takes significantly more. And if you have magical or occupied,
I think I have one.
Significant.
Exactly, and it starts to get real. It doesn't grow a little bit. Like epic natural is a little bit bigger, but epic magical is 4 times bigger than that common I talked about. I don't have any occupieds, which are the really crazy ones. But this is, I don't want to veer our way back into tokenomics, but interesting to note how many DC that time crystal sales could account for if land launches well. I just want to leave that in a little nut, like lying there on the side of the road. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm ready. Maybe time crystals wise, I'm ready for about half of my plots, and I'm happy to buy some. I bet I'm going to end up using. I don't have a lot of extra crypto right now, so unless I sell a card or something that I have lying around, I suspect I'm going to end up doing something like, 12,000 PP on a good chunk of my plots of land instead of the 50,000. I might be wrong about the numbers. I know there's the DC staking commitment, and I know 50,000 DC staked in a plot of land is like the maximum that I guess you can on a regular plot of land. But then I don't think that that ties directly to production points, does it?
Yeah.
Does if
There's a lot. So I would recommend, if you haven't listened to it, Gathering the Magic has a really good video talking about budget options for land. Not necessarily you would look at budget options, but he goes into some examples. For example, gold foils or legendaries and stuff, and how, because it's a percentage of the BCX to level is what
Mhm.
generates the cost of the DEC stake requirement. So
Mm,
certain mathematical uh, types of cards and levels and BCX lends itself to a good balance of production points versus cost of cards versus cost of
gotcha,
DEC staking. So you can
gotcha.
definitely min max that, and you'll see in that video he gives you some examples. Like I think it's like 15 regular foil epics versus like 8 gold foil rares, or whatever. I mean, there's different breakpoints and targets depending on what's the best cost ratio that you want to get to. Now, when you do that, you have to also take into account that your production points are not going to be ideal either. But his example walks you through how do you
Yeah.
maximize cost to production points. Now, if your budget for land is such where you're like, hey, cost be damned, I just want the highest production points possible. Well, that's a different equation. That's a different calculation, different strategy at that point. So
Yeah.
it all ties back into what's your budget? What is your budget for cards, for DEC, for time crystals? What's your target for production points? Are you farming
Mhm.
SPS? Are you farming grain? Are you buying grain? So land is very complicated. And this is only land 1.5. This is not with buildings or resources or liquidity pools. So it's you could so for as a content creator here, Dwayne, this is like a sweet spot for a lot of content if you ever wanted to go down this rabbit hole,
Yeah.
because there's just a ton here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's so, like, you just scraped the surface there. And if someone's listening to the words you just said, like, there's about five different considerations at least. Do you want the best for the least it costs? Is the sky the limit for your cost? Because that's not just DC, but it's actually time crystals also. And then it's the cards that you can utilize. And for me, I think as I look at my land plots available, the rarities present, I only have 6 commons, and then most of them are rare. I'm going to be spending a ton on the time crystals. I'm going to need a lot more time crystals first of all. Maybe double the time crystals I currently have. I need probably double the DC I currently have. My card value, my deck of cards is probably adequate just for my gold foils. I don't need my gold foils. Now, I want some of my gold foils for my rank play and my tournament experience, etc. But I don't need them. I have 2.2 million, 2.3 million collection power, or 620,000 production points available in my gold foils. Again, I don't know how many PP I'll need per plot, and some will be less and some will be more. I don't know if that's going to be enough or not. To be honest, I need to dive deeper into this. Is I guess where what I'm, and I've
Yeah.
known that, but yeah, I
It's
will check
very
out the other.
interesting. And what I can say is you're not alone. I've had a number of people approach me and say, Tails, what do I do here? I mean, this is so complicated. And what I can say is I've actually, sat down and done full analysis. Is, someone gives me a budget, someone gives their cards, their land, and I'll spit out basically a recommendation and a strategy for them. Now, I have to charge for
Mhm.
that just because it takes time to do all that. But there's a lot here. Like, there is a method to
Mhm.
the madness, and it is quite quite complicated. But the good news is if you spend the time and you focus on it, you can definitely come up with a great plan. But as you dive into it and you roll up your sleeves, you're going to see that there's if you think the battle helper discussion is nuanced and complex, well, it's got nothing on land and land strategy. So
Mhm. See, I feel like this is a good place to land because for all the, let's say, serious contemplation of some of the difficult things in front of us, we are now both smiling, thinking about the complexity and the nuance and the thoughtfulness required with launching your plots of land well, which bodes really well because I've seen After Sound, Gathering, yourself, myself, Gank, Keys, everyone who covers this has brought the same sense of, ooh, this is deep, this is real, this is serious. I gotta figure this out. I don't know if I like. There's a sense of overwhelm, but there's also a sense of excitement, which to me points me back to a place of confidence that there really will be a satisfying experience coming with land 1.5 and more so with 2.0, but 1.5 will get something meaningful. There's a lot here, man. Like, clearing the land, choosing the right monsters, doing it so effectively. It could have real strong ramifications for DEC and therefore SPS. Card market might be dried up because of it. So there's a lot of interesting what ifs, and there's a lot of complexity, a lot of meat on the bones with something like this. And so it's almost a nice place to maybe wrap, because it feels like it's a bit of optimism, because it does point us to a place of excitement, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what happens with the percentage of land that is, basically started and worked and how that affects DEC and SPS, at the end of the day, for me as a personal player in Splinterlands, I've done my research. I'll put my plan into action, and per my land videos, I talk about my day 2 land strategy. It's not just all the prep and the planning and the essentially enjoyment of the gaming planning that I've done thus far for land, but it's what happens once land goes live. How do you react to that? What do you do next? How does your strategy change or morph? Or how do you proceed with land? That's the part of the game that's going to be fun. It's going to put a smile on many of our faces moving forward, and that's regardless of if land is financially a success or a flop. It doesn't really matter, because at this point, whether it does well or not, I'm still playing it, right? It's not like I'm all of a sudden going to sell all my land and my cards and say I'm out, I'm taking my ball and going home. It's like, no, I'm here, I'm going to do what I can, I'm going to play the game. Now, is the game going to make me money or not? Who knows? But in the meantime, I'm going to play the game. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like I said this, but I just want to reiterate. I think that this bodes well. We've admitted this is a pivotal moment for our game, and we've wondered, and we are still wondering, will it go where we want it to? It can't be decided today. We need to get our hands on it. But I like that I hear a little bit of a laugh in your voice as you describe it. There's a bit of joy as you talk about the complexity here, and that's good. And I feel the same way. And so that that's not the end of the story, but I like that that's where we are at right now. And I don't know if it's 6 days. I don't know if it's this month or if it's now next month that we get it in the Mavs with the test server. But to give a shout out to Paul, who left this comment a long while ago, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it. Paul said that he hopes they drop it in Mavs before Farp leaves on vacation, and then and then I think we have it on Mavs for a week, and it gets put in when Farp is back. I don't know if that ends up being the case, because I don't know if we even know when Farp's going to be back. Maybe he needs more than a week. I don't know. And I would hate, and Agrod said he would like for it to be a real short time on the Mavs server, but Weirdbeard didn't really agree in some sense to that. He didn't disagree, but he didn't agree. So, point is, I don't know, but man, whether it's 9 days away, 18 days away, even 30 days away, this pivotal moment for our game is coming, and it's going to be a real joy, because like you said, it's been months in the making, years in the making. This is an exciting moment. Fireworks are coming. Whether they're exactly what we want or not, fireworks are coming. And so, yeah, it's going to be a great time. And Tails, just thanks so much for coming by today. Do you have any last comments, or do you want to, anything you want to say? Just take some time here.
No,
You got
it's
it.
it's been a great conversation, Dwayne. I really appreciate you scheduling this and getting this on our calendars. And yeah, I mean, always a pleasure to come on and talk to you and talk shop with Splinterlands. Couldn't think of a better way to spend my afternoon here today, and really appreciate it. So thanks for the opportunity, and let's do it again soon.
Amazing. Yep. Thanks, man. And okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you. Earlier, I saw Nathan was in the crowd. Appreciate you guys popping by, hanging out, spending time with us while we discuss and unpack some of these topics. And guys, I just hope you have an amazing day. God bless.